Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Coping with Crisis. And as you've been following along with us, this is kind of our counseling series, and we're looking at the topic of how to handle our anger from a biblical standpoint. And we went through a lot of facets about anger, but this is kind of part two of the lies we believe, and those lies we believe have to come out of us. And so this is what sometimes fuels our anger and fuels our perception of things. And it's very important that, like we talked about last time, we cut off the rewards that we're getting out of anger. You know, the rewards could be manipulating people, it could be backing people off or whatever. We have to cut those rewards off. And then we have to get to the lies we believe about ourselves, God, reality, and others. And because those are the things that fuel our anger a lot of times. Those lies sit there and create grievances that we start having about people and God and everything else. Well, anyway, certain lies that we talked about last week, I won't go over them again, but I want to add to those lists of common things that people are angry about, but a lot of it is there's an element of truth to it, but then there's a whole bunch of misperception and lies about it. So we want to talk a little bit about that today. So another lie, just to bring to your attention, that a lot of people have is that whatever happened to them, like let's say they got raped or they got molested or something hardcore happened to them, they were abandoned by their parents or something really bad. So we don't deny that those things happen and they're real, right? But what happens sometimes is the person then perceives something incorrectly. And so if they were raped or molested, I see a lot of times people who have went through something like that have a very bad outlook of themselves. They don't see themselves even in the biblical framework, by the way. They see them lower than a slug. And so I'll hear things like, I'm damaged goods, I'm messed up, I don't count for anything. And so they start leading a very destructive life. And when I talk about this, I'm not talking about self-esteem movement. I'm not talking about that, where you build someone up for no reason at all. I'm talking that the biblical standard of we are made in God's image and yet we are sinners is maintained. That's a balance. But what I see with some of these other people is that because of these damaging things that happen to them, real stuff, their view of themselves is less than what the Bible says. They not only see themselves as sinners, they see themselves as a slug. They don't see them as even human beings. They see that they're not worthy of anything. And so they start leading a destructive life. And unfortunately, a lot of people then misunderstand that, and they think, well, I don't want to coddle them in their self-esteem. It's not about self-esteem. It's about getting them to the biblical view of themselves. If you do not possess the biblical view, whether it's pride or whether it's I'm a slug, I'm an animal, I'm useless, I'm worthless, then those are the two extremes. And usually people who have been hurt very deeply are on the bottom level. They're not where the Bible is. And so a lot of that is your misperception of life. And so that makes people very angry. If you think that you're damaged goods, that God can't redeem your life, that He can't redeem what the locusts have eaten, if you think you're unsavable, I've met people that think they're not savable. They're that bad, right? So it's not an issue of them not understanding they're a sinner. They just think they're unsavable. They think their life is ruined. And so this is why people commit suicide. This is why people destroy their lives with drugs and alcohol and whatnot. And it's because they have a misperception of themselves from a biblical standpoint. And again, this has nothing to do with self-esteem. It's not psychological babble. We're talking about people who don't even see them in the correct light that God sees them in. And if you're part of that group that doesn't see themselves correctly, it will lead to destructive behaviors. It will lead to people cutting themselves. It will lead to suicides. It will lead to just doing very destructive things. And they end up having a shorter life because the life they live is so destructive right? They get killed, they die, they're drunk driving or whatever. So they live a very destructive life. If that's there, that has to be corrected with the truth. Or how about these other things? Because people have been hurt so bad, they think, well, God wasn't there to protect me. I guess God really doesn't love me. And this is where these people move in through life and can't trust God, don't really believe that God's a loving God, and therefore, obviously, they reject Him. But even if they're a believer, they'll believe, okay, I got saved, but I don't really believe God loves me. I know that sounds weird, but it's true. They really don't. Or let's say they look back in their life and things happen to them, and they're like, where was God in that? Well, not only do they not believe God loved them, but that He does not provide for them, or that He does not protect them. And so, yeah, they believe in God, but they don't believe He's there to provide for them or protect them. So if you don't believe that God provides for you, if you don't believe God protects you, then I know what kind of behavior you'll exhibit. You'll provide for yourself. You'll become very independent, and you won't want anyone's help. And also, you will go into protect mode. You will surround yourself with things of this life that give you security instead of getting your security from God. Because again, if you think God doesn't protect you, then you will protect yourself. And you start seeing people take extreme measures to protect themselves, whether that's through money, whether that's through security, as far as, guns or whatever, or self-defense or whatever it is. They'll go to extreme measures. And so you'll start seeing that, and basically the person is saying, I have to rely on myself. I can't trust God to protect me. And that's a big problem. That lie has to get out. Or, God's just not there for me. He wasn't there for me, and He's not here now. And yeah, I know He exists and stuff, but I'm alone in this, and He isn't there. So this idea of I'm alone, well, I can tell you what that does to people. It makes them starve for intimacy with God, but they won't go to Him because they think He's not there for them. So they look for intimacy in other relationships. Unfortunately, the typical intimacy they're looking for is usually a corrupted form of intimacy. And they end up usually misperceiving the kind of intimacy they need, really. And so anyway, that becomes a lie. And it's driven from the lie that God isn't there for me. And you got to see, all of this would make a person carry around a grievance, wouldn't it? If you don't think God loves you, if you don't think God provides or protects you or He's not there for you, you would be very angry. You would carry around a grievance against God. And that's what a lot of people's problems are. Unbelievers, obviously, and believers. A lot of unbelievers, when you look at some of the staunch atheists and the staunch agnostics that are usually in debates, if you trace their history, a lot of times they grew up in a Christian home. How is it that they went from growing up in a Christian home to be a staunch atheist? Because they misperceived things. Things happened to them, and they misperceived that God wasn't there for me, He doesn't love me, and therefore they go into opposing God because of that, because they're angry. Have you noticed atheists are typically angry? Ungodly people are very angry. What are they so angry about? They're angry at God. They're angry at He didn't protect them. He didn't come to their rescue. Stuff like that. So they carry around a grievance against God. Other lies that people believe. Because they grew up in a family of origin, and that family of origin put certain standards on them, and they never can meet their family's expectations, and so they always come up short. And then they transfer that to God and say, I never can meet God's expectations, so they always fall short. And they have this mentality, I'll never measure up. Well, they don't even understand how Christ is the answer for them measuring up, because He did the work for them. He lived the perfect life. And so they become what we call defeated. They become defeated in this life. They can't keep their family standards. They can't keep, whatever standards God has, so they give up. So that's why a lot of people don't come to faith. They think their relationship with God is based on works instead of by faith. And by the way, once a person becomes a believer, they still can be trapped in that mode. They can understand salvation is by faith alone, but then in their sanctification, they're still doing the measuring up the standards thing in their sanctification, and they're relating to God by works. Now, there's no doubt there's works involved in our sanctification, but you have a relationship with Him already. It's based on your relationship through Christ. You don't have to get brownie points for Him. Our service to Him is, what He's called us to do. It has nothing to do with keeping the relationship. It has nothing to do with sustaining the relationship. Yes, if we sin, can we get out of fellowship with the Lord? Of course, but we can come back to the fellowship by obviously repenting and asking for forgiveness. But relating to God is not based on brownie points. It's not based on me trying to earn His approval, His acceptance, I should say. And that's not how we relate. But anyway, when people come from a background like that they had to keep their mom and dad's standards, and boy, if you didn't meet those standards that mom and dad had, boy, you're less than, you'll never measure up. Well, they keep that mentality going through the rest of their life, and they view themselves as never measuring up, and they become defeated. Well, that's a lie. When someone always feels that they never measure up, that incites anger inside of them. They have a grievance. And really, the grievance is maybe a disappointment in themselves, or the fact that someone puts standards on them or whatnot. And so typically, the way to get away from that is they go find relationships where there are no standards. It totally makes sense when you see that they come from a very rigid background, very high standards, and then they end up going to a relationship that has basically no standards, nothing. So it ends up hurting them, but at the end, they're still angry. Or they misperceive what happened to them, and their family made them out to be a bad seed. They're a problem child. And then you have one person in the family that's a golden child. Well, guess what the bad seed feels? They feel angry, resentment to the parents making them the bad seed when they really weren't. And so that plays into anger. That goes into why people are carrying a grudge with them. They don't want to be viewed as the bad seed. In fact, many times if they are given that role as the bad seed, they will actually act it out to either prove it or disprove it. And so that's why people get destructive, or people go on the other side and try to disprove being the bad seed and do it through performance. But all of that to say is this is where anger comes from. And then obviously people who believe the lie that I always have to be in control, that's another lie, because they feel like their life is out of control. They feel that God doesn't control things. They can't depend on God. And so the lie they believe is I need to be in control. Well, these are where your control freaks come from. And again, control freaks are very angry, because if they can't control something, they pout, they get mad, they get passive aggressive, and they try to control the whole world. But it really is nothing but a life of frustration, because the reality shows them you can't control anything. Only God can control stuff. So that's a lie. Then there's other lies that people get. Nobody needs me. Nobody chooses me. I'm always wrong. I'm damaged goods. I mean, we talked about that. You can't trust others. You can't trust women. You can't trust men. You keep these lies going. And by the way, when you say those kinds of things, no one needs me, that creates anger. If you say you can't trust others, that means inevitably you're not going to have any relationships, so you're going to be angry about not having relationships because you can't trust people. So you see how it starts snowballing the effect of anger. This is why people are so angry. Let's say you're a man and you say, I can't trust women. You got burned a couple of times by women. You say, I just can't trust women. Okay, does that mean all women are bad? Because that's what you're doing. So if all women are bad and you have a natural desire in you to be with a woman, and you know you can't be with a woman because you can't trust them because they're going to stab you in the back, then you're going to be very angry about that. You're going to be angry about your desire. You're going to be angry that you can't find the right person out there or whatever, that those people don't exist. They only exist in fantasy. you're going to carry around a grudge, a grievance against life, a grievance against women, a grievance against men. And that's where a lot of anger comes from. Again, these are all lies. And so these people keep people at arm's length. They don't want to get close because I don't want to be betrayed or disappointed with other people. Other lies. I can't cope with life without X, Y, and Z. So whatever coping mechanism they have chosen, it's a lie, and they believe they can't deal with life without the coping mechanism, whatever that coping mechanism is. It could be another relationship. It could be drugs. It could be alcohol. It could be sex. It could be anything like that. But they tell a lie to themselves because they've been hurt really bad. They can't deal with that. So guess what? What happens when you take that very thing away that they can't cope with life without? Boy, they hit the ceiling. They get very angry about that. How dare you do this? And it could be stupid things. It could be a dog. It could be just goofy things that people have turned into a coping mechanism. And man, I tell you what, they'll go to the mat with it, about it. And so when you start realizing that that person is really believing a lie, the only one that we can't live life without is Jesus. That's it. There's nothing else. You and I can't cope without Jesus. That's the truth. But these other things, no, those are lies. Other lies, just to mention a few. If I'm honest and open with people, it will be used against me. And that happens a lot of times to people. They can't be honest and open with somebody because someone betrayed them. And so it was, that confidential information was used against them. And so they will go through life never wanting to open up, never wanting to be honest with anyone because they will feel they'll be betrayed by it. Or how about this one? I'm a victim of my circumstances. Yeah, things happen to you, no doubt about it. But victim of my circumstances means that they're not willing to be responsible for rehabbing themselves. That causes them anger. Victims are always angry. And until they take responsibility, what happens to a victim is they feel powerless because they have jettisoned responsibility. And so by doing that, they feel they lack the power in their lives. And therefore, they're just a helpless victim. That becomes a very angry thing for them. They don't like that feeling, but they do like the lack of responsibility, but they don't like the feeling that it comes with that. So it's kind of a they like it, but they don't. And the part that they don't, they become very angry about it, that they have no power to change anything, that they're hopeless, that the circumstances are never going to change. And so they feel like they're damaged goods or whatnot. Anyway, victims are always angry, by the way. Victims are always angry. So with all that saying, I just throwing these general things out there. You and I might believe different lies about this, but the lies typically generate anger. That's why the writer of Hebrews calls them a root of bitterness. Why does he use the word bitterness? Because they make us bitter. They make us angry. And so when we believe lies, then we rage. We carry a grievance. And those lies that we believe strike at the heart of reality about ourselves, God, others, and that really can mess us up and make us a very angry person. Lies create bondage, okay? Truth sets you free. So if you do some introspection and look at what are the lies that I created when bad things were done to me? If you can go through an inventory and look at all the bad things that happened and how did I perceive this, how did I perceive God, how I perceive others, how did I perceive myself, then that's taking inventory. And what I want you to see is there any lies that were created from the things that hurt you? Okay? Now, here's a little understanding about why our perceptions go off when people do bad things to us. There is no doubt people do bad things. So that's what I'm not minimizing that, nor am I denying that. There's no doubt bad things happen to you. But what tends to happen when those things happen, if we don't process it correctly in a biblical fashion, is that we will personalize it, and so make it about us, that these people did bad things because there was something wrong with me. And when in reality, it has nothing to do with you, it has to do with their sin. But you personalize it. And then the second thing we do is we see it as all pervasive throughout our lives, that it's everywhere. And what do you mean by that? Well, if we were betrayed by somebody or whatever, a spouse, let's say, then everybody will betray us. That person will betray us. That person betrays us. And then all of a sudden you start seeing a theme in life of, I just keep getting betrayed and betrayed and betrayed and betrayed. And it becomes all throughout your life. And therefore, you can see that you've went beyond what the issue was. So you personalize it, and then it's all pervasive. And the last one is you make it permanent. And what I mean by that is you're stuck. Whatever happened to you, you're the victim now, and you can never get out of that victimhood. You're stuck. And this is the way your life will be for the rest of time. And because of that, you obviously can see where the anger could come from. There's no changing you. There's no getting out of this. There's no redemption. There's no freeing you up, right? Because you had something taken away and you can never get it back, or whatever. You lost your reputation, or you this or that. And that then is an extreme interpretation of the stuff that happened to you. So just basically those three things, you can see where you can exaggerate the bad that happened to you. Again, not minimizing the bad, but just saying, did I personalize this when it was them who were just sinners and selfish and did what they did? Did I make it all pervasive? All men are pigs. All women will betray you. You can't trust this person. You can't trust a church. I was burned at church, so all churches are bad. You see what I'm saying? It's all pervasive. You do a black and white thing. It's all this way. And then lastly, you cement it in and make it permanent. And because reality is like this, and because I'm like this, and because God's like this, nothing's going to change. I'm going to go to the end of my life always having this or that, or not having this or that. And you can see how that right there will cause you to misperceive reality, believe lies, and be a very angry individual. You will carry that anger to your grave if you don't get those lies out. That's why it's extremely important when Jesus said, the truth will set you free. It's true. It will. But you have to know what lies you believe first. If you can identify the lies you can believe, then you can identify the truth that is the antidote to that lie. So that's going to bring our conclusion about the lies we believe. Now, next time, we're going to go into the next step. We identify the lies, we cut off the rewards, and now we're going to do the next step, which is forgiveness. We're going to talk about that extensively. In fact, it's going to probably take several sessions to talk about forgiveness, which is the last step of being able to release anger. So you got to get rid of rewards, got to get rid of lies, and then the next step is forgiveness. We'll talk about that next time.